Picture this: the grand halls of the African Union Summit in Addis Ababa, buzzing with the weight of a continent's hopes and tensions. Heads of state, diplomats, and dignitaries fill the room, their eyes fixed on protocol and tradition. Then, in a single, electrifying moment, Captain Ibrahim Traore, Burkina Faso's fiery young leader, does the unthinkable. He refuses to stand. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Whispers turn to murmurs. Was this a calculated act of rebellion or a spontaneous burst of conviction? Why would a man, barely 37, risk diplomatic chaos to make a point? Buckle up, because this story of defiance, pride, and Pan-African passion is about to unfold in ways you won't believe. The African Union Summit in Addis Ababa is no ordinary gathering. Picture a grand hall, gleaming with polished floors and towering flags of 54 nations, each one a symbol of Africa's complex tapestry. Heads of state, decked out in tailored suits and traditional regalia, fill the room, their aides buzzing like bees around a hive. The air crackles with anticipation. Deals are whispered in corners, alliances forged over coffee, and rivalries simmering just beneath the surface. This is where Africa's future gets debated, where leaders posture for influence, and where every gesture carries weight. In 2025, the stakes were higher than ever, with the continent grappling with security crises, economic woes, and the shadow of foreign influence. Enter Captain Ibrahim Traore, Burkina Faso's 37-year-old leader, a man who's become a lightning rod for both adoration and controversy. Known for his fiery anti-imperialist rhetoric, Traore struts into the summit not as a diplomat, but as a revolutionary in military fatigues. His presence alone is a statement. Here's a guy who toppled a junta in 2022, kicked out French forces, and nationalized Burkina Faso's gold mines, all while quoting Thomas Sankara like a gospel preacher. To some, he's a hero, a modern-day Sankara fighting for African sovereignty. To others, he's a reckless strongman cozying up to Russia and stirring trouble. Either way, when Traore walks in, eyes follow. The summit's agenda is packed: climate change, trade agreements, and the ever-looming question of how to unify a continent often divided by its own diversity. But beneath the polished speeches, there's tension. Some leaders, backed by Western powers, push for integration with global markets. Others, like Traore, smell neo-colonialism in every trade deal and foreign aid package. The stage is set for a clash not just of ideas, but of visions for Africa's soul. And Traore, with his unapologetic swagger, is about to light the fuse. The moment of defiance. The summit's second day dawns with a packed schedule, but the real drama unfolds during a ceremonial session meant to symbolize unity. It's one of those meticulously choreographed moments. All leaders are expected to rise for a joint pledge to the AU's charter, a gesture of solidarity meant to project harmony to the world. The hall is a sea of vibrant colors: Ghanaian kente, Nigerian agbada, South African Madiba shirts. Each leader standing in sync as the AU anthem blares through the speakers. The anthem's lyrics, calling for African unity and liberation, echo off the walls, a reminder of the continent's hard-fought dreams. But as the music swells, one figure remains seated, unmoved, his posture rigid yet calm. All eyes dart to Captain Ibrahim Traore. Traore's refusal isn't just a breach of protocol, it's a grenade lobbed into the room's fragile decorum. The Burkinabe leader sits with his arms crossed, his green beret tilted slightly, his face a mask of steely resolve. Whispers ripple through the hall. A few leaders exchange glances, some with raised eyebrows, others with barely concealed smirks. The moderators, caught off guard, fumble to keep the session moving, but the damage is done. The cameras, ever present at such events, zoom in on Traore, capturing every detail: the faint crease in his military fatigues, the glint of determination in his eyes, the way his hands rest calmly on the table as if daring anyone to challenge him. Why did he do it? To understand, you need to know the man. Traore, born in 1988, grew up in a Burkina Faso scarred by poverty and foreign influence. A soldier by training, he rose through the ranks, fueled by a deep resentment of what he saw as Western exploitation masquerading as aid. When he seized power in 2022 at age 34, he didn't just overthrow a government, he declared war on a system. His speeches, often delivered in rapid-fire French, drip with references to neocolonialism, citing France's grip on Burkina Faso's economy and military. By 2025, he'd already expelled French troops, cozying up to Russia for arms, and Mali for regional alliances. To Traore, the AU's pledge was no mere formality. It was a symbol of an institution he viewed as compromised, too cozy with foreign powers, too slow to challenge the global order. The room's reaction is a kaleidoscope of emotions. Some leaders, like those from Mali and Niger, fellow junta-led nations, nod subtly, their own anti-Western sentiments aligning with Traore's. Others, particularly from wealthier, Western-aligned nations like Kenya or Nigeria, shift uncomfortably, aware that this act could spiral into a diplomatic mess. The AU's charter, after all, is sacred ground, a document born from decades of struggle to unify a fractured continent. To snub it is to snub the dream of Nkrumah, Nyerere, and Mandela. Yet Traore's supporters see something else, a fearless stand against an AU they view as bloated, bureaucratic, and beholden to external donors. As the anthem fades, the hall sits in uneasy silence, the weight of Traore's defiance hanging like a storm cloud. Whispers turn to fire. The silence in the AU Summit Hall doesn't last long. As the anthem fades and delegates shuffle back to their seats, the atmosphere shifts from stunned to electric. Traore's refusal to stand isn't just a moment. It's a spark that ignites a flurry of reactions, both in the room and beyond. Diplomats lean toward each other, their hushed conversations a mix of shock, amusement, and calculation. A senior official from Ethiopia, the host nation, scribbles furiously on a notepad, likely drafting a statement to smooth over the awkwardness. Meanwhile, junior aides dart between tables, relaying messages as if the summit has morphed into a high-stakes chess game. Traore, still seated, doesn't flinch. His delegation, a small but loyal group of Burkinabe advisors, mirrors his calm, their faces betraying nothing but quiet confidence. Outside the hall, the news spreads like wildfire. Journalists camped out in the AU's media center catch wind of the incident within minutes, thanks to a few quick-fingered attendees who leak the moment to international press. Headlines start to form. Burkina Faso's Traore snubs AU anthem. Defiant leader sparks summit uproar. The story gains traction because it's more than a breach of etiquette. It's a symbol of a deeper divide. Traore's act resonates with a growing wave of African youth, frustrated by leaders they see as out of touch, beholden to foreign capitals like Paris, Washington, or Beijing. To them, Traore's defiance is a middle finger to a system that's kept Africa tethered to external powers for too long. Back inside, the session resumes, but the mood is palpably tense. The next agenda item, a discussion on regional security, feels almost secondary as heads of state steal glances at Traore. Some see his act as reckless, a stunt that undermines the AU's fragile unity. Others, particularly from nations chafing under Western sanctions or IMF loans, view it as a bold call to rethink the AU's priorities. A delegate from Zimbabwe, known for its own anti-Western stance, is overheard chuckling, "He's got guts. I'll give him that." But not everyone's amused. A Nigerian diplomat representing one of Africa's economic powerhouses mutters about immature grandstanding and the need for serious leadership. The divide is clear. Traore's gamble has turned the summit into a battleground of ideologies. What makes this moment so potent is its context. The AU, for all its lofty goals, has long been criticized as a club of elites, where leaders sip champagne while ordinary Africans struggle. Traore, with his military background and populist rhetoric, positions himself as the antithesis of that image. His refusal to stand isn't just about the anthem, it's a rejection of what he sees as a hollow ritual, a performance of unity that masks disarray. He's betting that his defiance will rally those who share his vision of a self-reliant Africa, free from what he calls the chains of neocolonialism. But it's a risky bet. The fallout unfolds. As the summit presses on, Traore's refusal to stand becomes the unspoken undercurrent of every conversation. The hall, with its high ceilings and rows of flags, feels like a pressure cooker. Delegates try to focus on the agenda: counterterrorism strategies, climate funding, trade zones, but the incident lingers like a stubborn fog. Traore himself remains composed, his demeanor almost infuriatingly serene. He listens to speeches, occasionally jotting notes, his green beret a stark contrast to the sea of suits around him. But his silence speaks louder than words. He's not here to apologize or backtrack, he's doubling down, letting his act reverberate through the summit's polished corridors. Behind closed doors, the AU's top brass scramble to contain the fallout. The chairperson of the AU Commission, usually a master of diplomacy, faces a dilemma: address Traore's defiance publicly and risk escalating the drama, or ignore it and appear weak. A hurried meeting of senior officials debates whether to issue a formal reprimand. Some argue it's a minor breach, not worth derailing the summit. Others, especially from nations aligned with Western interests, push for a statement condemning Traore's disrespect to the AU's values. The debate exposes a deeper rift. The AU's struggle to balance its Pan-African ideals with the realities of a continent split by competing allegiances, some to the West, others to emerging powers like Russia or China. Meanwhile, Traore's delegation isn't idle. His advisors, a mix of young military officers and Pan-Africanist intellectuals, work the room, quietly rallying support. They target delegates from nations like Mali, Niger, and Eritrea, countries with their own grievances against foreign influence. These sidebar conversations are intense, filled with talk of sovereignty and breaking free from neocolonial shackles. Traore's team frames his act as a wake-up call, a challenge to an AU they see as too comfortable with foreign aid and too slow to confront global inequities. A Malian diplomat, sipping tea during a break, nods approvingly. He's saying what many of us think but don't dare voice. The ripple effects extend beyond the summit. In Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's capital, news of Traore's defiance sparks impromptu celebrations. Young Burkinabé, many of whom see him as a folk hero, gather in the streets, waving flags and chanting his name. Social media buzzes with hashtags like Chakr Traore stands for Africa, turning the moment into a rallying cry for a generation fed up with corruption and external meddling. But not everyone's cheering. Critics, especially in Francophone Africa's more stable economies, call Traore's move divisive, arguing it weakens the AU at a time when unity is critical. A Senegalese analyst quoted in a French newspaper warns that such stunts glorify ego over progress, pointing to Burkina Faso's ongoing struggles with insurgency and poverty as evidence that Traore's bravado might be better spent at home. A continent at a crossroads, the summit's final hours are a whirlwind of maneuvering, with Traore's defiance casting a long shadow. As leaders gather for the closing plenary, the atmosphere is thick with unspoken tension. The AU's protocol team, desperate to restore order, ensures the session runs like clockwork, but Traore's presence looms large. He sits at his table, his posture unchanged, calm, defiant, almost regal in his military fatigues. When it's his turn to speak, the room leans in. Traore doesn't mention his earlier act directly, but his words are a masterclass in coded defiance. He rails against foreign agendas disguised as aid, calls for a new African renaissance, and invokes the spirit of Kwame Nkrumah and Patrice Lumumba. His speech, delivered in crisp French with a preacher's cadence, electrifies some and unnerves others. A delegate from Ghana later admits, "You could feel the room split, half in awe, half on edge." Outside the summit, the incident takes on a life of its own. Across Africa, radio stations and TV panels dissect Traore's move, turning him into a polarizing symbol. In cities like Bamako and Harare, where anti-Western sentiment runs deep, he's hailed as a champion of African pride. Street vendors in Mali start selling T-shirts with Traore's silhouette and the words "I sit for Africa." But in capitals like Nairobi and Dakar, opinion pieces criticize him as a populist playing to the gallery, risking the AU's credibility for personal clout. A South African commentator writes, "Unity isn't built by grand gestures, but by grinding out compromises. Traore's stunt might feel good, but it solves nothing." The diplomatic fallout is subtle, but real. Several Western-aligned nations quietly lobby for the AU to issue a statement on protocol adherence, a veiled jab at Traore. Meanwhile, his allies in the Sahel, leaders from Mali and Niger, double down, praising his courage to expose hypocrisy. The AU, caught in the middle, opts for a vague, closing communiqué that reaffirms respect for shared values without naming names. It's a classic diplomatic dodge, but it leaves no one fully satisfied. Traore, for his part, exits the summit without a word to the press, his silence amplifying his mystique. His delegation leaks that he views the AU as a work in progress, a body that must shed its reliance on foreign funding to truly serve Africa. Back in Burkina Faso, Traore's act galvanizes his base. Crowds greet his return at Ouagadougou's airport, chanting slogans of sovereignty. But the euphoria masks challenges. His country faces jihadist insurgencies, economic strain, and criticism over democratic backsliding. Some argue his summit stunt was a distraction from domestic woes, a way to burnish his image as a Pan-African warrior. Others see it as a genuine cry for change, a signal that Africa's younger generation demands leaders who act, not just talk. The summit, meant to showcase unity, has instead exposed a continent wrestling with its identity, torn between pragmatism and idealism, between global integration and radical self-reliance. The spark becomes a flame. The summit's closing ceremony is meant to be a moment of harmony, a choreographed display of African unity as leaders clasp hands for the cameras. But Traore's refusal to stand has shattered that illusion, and the final hours crackle with a raw, unscripted energy. As the chairperson calls for a moment of silence to honor fallen African peacekeepers, the room complies, except for Traore. He remains seated, his eyes fixed forward, a silent protest that feels louder than any speech. This second act of defiance, more deliberate than the first, sends a jolt through the hall. A Cameroonian delegate whispers, "He's not just challenging protocol, he's challenging the whole system." The cameras catch it all. The furrowed brows of veteran leaders, the subtle nods from younger delegates, the nervous glances of AU staff. The climax isn't just Traore's act, it's the realization that he's tapped into something bigger. Whispers among delegates reveal a split that's been simmering for years. The old guard, comfortable with the AU's diplomatic dance, versus a new wave hungry for radical change. Traore's gamble pays off in the room's undercurrents. A young diplomat from Chad, speaking off record, admits, he's saying what we all feel. Africa's been bowing too long. Across the continent, the moment lights a fuse. In Accra, Nairobi, and Lagos, youth forums erupt with debates, some calling Traore a visionary, others a reckless provocateur. His defiance forces a question. Can the AU, with its sprawling bureaucracy and foreign funding, truly lead Africa's charge for sovereignty? The summit ends not with unity, but with the stark truth. Traore has exposed a fracture, and the continent must now decide whether to mend it or break it apart entirely. Wrapping up the firestorm. Ibrahim Traore's refusal to stand at the AU summit wasn't just a fleeting moment. It was a seismic jolt that laid bare the tensions simmering beneath Africa's quest for unity. His defiance, bold and unapologetic, forced leaders and citizens alike to confront uncomfortable truths about the AU's role, its compromises, and the continent's path forward. Whether you see him as a revolutionary hero or a divisive showman, one thing's clear. Traore turned a routine summit into a mirror reflecting Africa's dreams and divisions. The fallout, diplomatic whispers, street rallies, heated debates, shows a continent at a turning point, wrestling with what it means to be truly sovereign. Now it's your turn to weigh in. Was Traore's act a courageous stand for African pride, or a reckless stunt that risks fracturing the AU? Drop your thoughts below, and let's keep the conversation going. If this story got you thinking, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the moments that shape our world. What do you think Africa's next chapter should be?